So all I could think about as I was getting my papers is, what was my family going to say? What was my dad going to say, especially? All I still managed to do was succeed at failing in life. Now, believe it or not, though, for the first time, and this came as a complete shock to me, my dad wasn't disappointed. He actually told me that he was proud of me for trying to take my life in a new direction, for try to turn it around. And knowing that my dad was proud of me was enough to keep me going through the upcoming rough years, because I still had these fluctuations of mood swings that were up and down. They were pretty drastic and taking their toll on me. But no matter how bad things were going to get, I wasn't going to try to kill myself again. And not because I didn't want out of the pain, but because I had already failed at it once, so why am I going to try it again and fail again? So I wasn't going to kill myself. I started spending money that I didn't have. I bounced around from job to job. I became involved with speed, drinking, short-term relationships to hide from my pain. I even tried marriage, and that ended after 3 years in a divorce. But something great did come from that failed marriage, and in that time, God blessed me with a wonderful son, who is my best friend to this day. Actually, the crazy thing is he was born December 25th, 1990 on Christmas Day. For me, being a person of faith, that means something to me. But it was also another time in my life that I actually had something I was proud to be part of. Now I maybe had something that I had someone else I had to live my life for, and it wasn't just me. I had hoped that God chose to bless me with my son, because as much as life had been sucking, I was trying to stay faithful to him in the hopes that one day he would change his mind and maybe change the person that I was, help me get things in order. But during the divorce, I was living in my parents' basement, still trying to escape the pain that was now going to be a part of the rest of my life. And my son seemed to be the only thing to keep me going. I wanted to make sure that I was a good father to him. I wanted to show him physically and emotionally how much I loved him and how much he meant to me. Because that's some of the things that my father didn't show me. As much as I know he loved me, he was a military guy. And since my first marriage failed, I decided that I never wanted to get married again. I mean, if I didn't like being with myself or love myself, how could I expect somebody else to? Besides, I only believed in being married once. So when I met a girl named Yvonne in 1994, I made it very clear to her that marriage was not on my cards. I was older than her. I had already been divorced. I was going through a divorce, at least. I had a 3-year-old son to boot. Besides, she was still in college. I had so much more experience than her. However, none of that seemed to stop her, and she kept pushing our relationship to its limits. And by limits, I mean good limits. Over the course of our dating years, Yvonne learned all about my struggles that I had growing up. She learned about my suicide attempt, and she actually ended up becoming more than a girlfriend. She actually became my first ever best friend. And after we dated for about 2 years, I began to rethink the whole marriage thing. Especially since we were both Christians and had strong faith in God, I began to wonder if maybe he had some other plans for me. Now, even though I would try to push her away, she kept coming back for more. She kept coming back for more of me, and I really couldn't understand why. I don't understand why she wanted to be with me, because I didn't even want to be with myself. I mean, we're married, it was, I think I was 23 at the time, and I still had been having all these struggles all my life, and I didn't even want to be me or be with me, so I don't know why she wanted to. But for the first time, I was actually getting a taste of what it was like to have someone love me unconditionally. So I finally gave in, and I asked her to marry me November 8th, 1996, and we were married in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Things were pretty well for that first year. I mean, I still had some pretty drastic ups and downs. My mood swings were like the flick of a light switch. But now things seemed to be getting progressively worse. And I really couldn't understand why, because I was with somebody that I did care about and that loved me. So I couldn't understand why things could be getting constantly worse. I mean, for a while there, we were in a pretty rough spot for the first 2 to 4 years. And I mean, to the point that I was so out of control that I actually demanded we have separate bedrooms to sleep in. And I think that the reason that I did that was because I couldn't get away from her. You see, when we were dating, I could get away for a couple days or weeks. I could come up with some sort of excuse. I could push her away, and I could hide in my darkness and just sulk and not like myself and not impact her in any way. But once you become married to somebody, your life becomes part of someone else. It's no longer just your life. It's somebody else's life. And I had real problems with that. No matter how hard I tried to keep pushing her away to save her from the pain that I was feeling and putting onto her, she kept fighting. And I have to tell you, at times I have no idea what she was fighting for. My depression, my moods, the job hopping was becoming debilitating. Financially, it was putting a strain on us. these weren't now just affecting me only, because like I said, I've now got someone else in my life. So this is affecting an innocent woman, a woman who wouldn't stop hoping and caring for me. Now, they never seem to affect my relationship with my son, just her, and I don't really know why that is, and I think it might be just a connection with how I was as a child. And my relationship with my dad. I just wanted to make sure that didn't happen with my son. But that made it very difficult for Yvonne, because she would see how I would treat him and turn around and treat her the complete opposite, and she couldn't understand how I could do that, treat each one so differently. A big meltdown came on Thanksgiving Day, 1998, as I laid in bed where I'd spent the previous days. Yvonne was sitting on the floor by my bed crying as I stared into nothingness right through her. And she said to me in her most sweet, caring, compassionate voice as I looked out the window, just blankly staring, she says, "I bet you could lay here all day." And I stared through the window, looked at her, went right through, just staring right through her. And I said, "No, not all day." I said, "But for the rest of my life." You see, I personally feel that I was actually at a point in my life, I know I was at a point where I was ready to give up, but I wasn't going to attempt suicide. This time, as strange as it may seem, I feel like I was at a point where I truly could have chosen to physically and mentally check out. Call it insanity, call it whatever you want to. I just know that where I was, it just felt so much better to be in here. And I think I really could have physically, mentally just checked out of life. But before I knew what was happening, I said to my wife in the calmest voice possible, and some of you that experience depression, moods, and things like that, you know how difficult, you don't just snap out of these things. So I believe this is God, because I just looked at her and I said, I need to get to the hospital before it's too late. So that following Saturday, November 29th, 1988, 10 years after my suicide attempt, that's when I was clinically diagnosed with manic depressive bipolar disorder, ADD, OCD, and a few other mental germs. I have more initials after my name than most PhDs. Now, I won't lie to you though. I was actually quite happy to hear that diagnosis, because for me it meant that there were things going on in me that no matter how hard I was trying, I couldn't control. It put a lot of my life into perspective. There was a reason I was who I was, and it wasn't because, like my parents were telling me, that's who I was choosing to be. It meant that I wasn't a dumb kid who never did well in school. There were learning disabilities that were never addressed. I knew my life was going to be different now because I knew who my enemy was. I had all the weapons that I needed to win the battle for my life. I spent a week in the hospital undergoing multiple tests, and after the hospital visit and the treatment, we got out and began a treatment program. I worked with a psychologist and a psychiatrist who not only worked together with each other, which is very important, but he also worked together with Yvonne and I. So the four of us had a perfect team. It was destined for success. Now trust me when I say things didn't get immediately better. There were still very difficult times. Trying to get used to the medications, trying to get used to the doses of medications. Some of you might be dealing with that. Some of you might know people that deal with it. Medication it's not just you take the pill and it's fixed. You got to figure out the right medication. You got to figure out the doses. It's a battle in itself. But at least we knew we were headed in the right direction. And after years of medication, counseling, communication building schools, and some college psych courses, I began to understand who I was and how I could live a happy life. We began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And in 2007, when I moved here to San Diego, I was no longer taking medication. I was no longer attending any counseling sessions. Now, I'm not saying by any far stretch of the imagination that I'm cured, because I'm not. I'm still manic depressive bipolar disorder. I still have the ADD, the OCD. You can ask my wife, it drives her crazy at times. But instead of my mood swings and my depression physically debilitating me for weeks on end at time, now it kind of lasted what I refer to typical depression. Most people have just a few days of a blue day. That's what my depression is like now. Because together we've learned and we continue to learn to manage my mental illness. Now I have no doubt that some of you have been through far worse than me. I know for a fact you've been through far worse than me. Some of you may be in a bad spot right now. I just want to encourage you to surround yourself with a support system. A support system that's going to be there for you when you will not be there for yourself. Because that's how it works. This is my personal recommendation, put your faith and trust in God. Because He'll be there when you think He's not. When I thought I was in the bedroom alone, hanging, I wasn't alone. I'm very blessed and I'm very fortunate that by God's hand, I'm physically here today to share with you how I found a successful life through an unsuccessful suicide. Because as I told you by my own hand, I shouldn't even be standing here. I should be dead. I shouldn't even be here at all. So I just want to take this opportunity to tell you from personal experience to reach out to the resources that you have at home, in your faith community, and here at MCAS. No one ever truly wants to die. And if you think you're in that spot right now, I can look at you and tell you, you know you don't want to die, you just want out of that pain. Because that's what I did. I wanted out of the pain. Unfortunately, I chose the wrong path.